Live stream audio test. 1, 2, 1, 2. Live stream audio test. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Live stream audio test 1, 2, 1, 2.
Audio test. 1, 2. Audio test. 1, 2. Live stream audio test. 1, 2, 1, 2. Audio test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Audio check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the North Somerset Council Executive on Wednesday the 17th of July. My name's Mike Bell. I'm the leader of council and chair the executive meeting, so really good to have so many people here with us this evening. We've got a number of important items on the agenda, but the first item of business is public participation, and we've got 4 members of the public who have asked to speak this evening, so I will invite them in order. It should work fine if you stay where you are and speak from where you are, but please do turn the microphone on before you do so, if that's okay. So the first speaker is Martin Slade, who I think is going to talk about food security. Martin?
Yes. Can you hear me all right? Thank you, Mike. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to address the Executive Committee this evening to raise concerns regarding food security. As the UK is becoming increasingly less self-sufficient in food security, surely we should be protecting our farms and, if possibly, increasing them. North Somerset Council has declared both a climate and nature emergency. As we know, farming and hence food security depends on nature and the climate to enable farmers to grow our food. Government and North Somerset Council have said that, and I quote, farmers are encouraged to diversify their activities and supplement their income from enterprises other than normal food production. I believe that this poses a significant threat to our food security and our related health and well-being. If councillors believe that there is a climate emergency, then you must agree that our local food is at risk from weather extremes. To protect our essential food sources at the highest level, I ask that North Somerset Council calls a food security emergency, which means that all food production is prioritised and protected at the highest level. For example, in line with the government's 13 critical infrastructure sectors, this is urgently requested, especially in the light of the imminent local plan consultation and submission. Along with the declared climate and nature emergency, land is also under attack from new government's required increase in house building, along with a 10% increase in biodiversity net gain on planning applications and escalating renewable energy projects. All of these government-related initiatives require land, which risks our food security at the local and national level. There is also a threat of war, and that will have an unknown negative effect on food production and provision and supply chains, both within the country and from abroad. So, has North Somerset Council assessed the current and future risks to our food production in relation to its declared climate and nature emergency and related policies? Has the Council analysed our regional food production over the last 5, 10, 20 years or so and our food needs into the future? Where will our food come from? If there are less animals or crops in the fields, what will we be eating? What will happen to our rural communities and associated jobs? And what will be the future for our children's health as a consequence? I would assume that appropriate risk analysis have been undertaken before declaring a climate and nature emergency and before implementing any policies, and so I would appreciate copies of these assessments. Considering the significant risks that a declared climate and nature emergency poses to our food production, I do ask that North Somerset Council immediately call for a food security emergency to prioritise and to protect our food production and our health at the highest level. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing this further with you in the near future.
Thank you, Martin. So I'll ask the relevant executive members to consider those points and respond to you in due course, but very relevant in the context of some of the conversations we've got today around our climate change work and also the local plan, of course. Thank you. Okay, so I've got, I think, a double act from Clevedon and District Community Land Trust. So Richard Westwood and Richard Harper. So you've got around 3 minutes each, and I think, Richard Westwood, you're going to kick off. So welcome back, Richard. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. Well, we're seeking to strike whilst the iron is hot in light of today's King's speech and its emphasis, amongst other things, on the need for housing. Dick Harper and myself, as chair of the Cleveland District Community Land Trust, are grateful for the opportunity to explain in person what the CDCLT is seeking to do, and we hope we can assist you to expand the provision of affordable homes in the Cleveland and surrounding area, which is dreadfully lacking. Our organisation was granted legal status as a cooperative and community benefit society with effect from December 2021, so we've been around for quite some time, and we've been laying plans mainly, basically. Our main aim is to expand the provision of affordable homes and other community facilities, including renewable energy. We're members of the National CLT network, so we're well plugged into what should be being done. At the moment, there's very little has been done, and has been done for the past 2 years at least. We've been advising our previous and current MP in their contributions to inform government policy on the provision and funding for affordable homes. Our Board of Volunteers in this is a not-for-profit body. We all live in Cleveland. We are looking to expand to go public, as it were, broad public membership and support for our aims, because it is desperately needed, as my colleague will explain in a short while. We are here to try and be a great positive support to North Somerset Council in its efforts to meet new housing targets, which you will know have been clamped back in place, as I understand it. The note that we've circulated to the executive members explains in more detail what we've been trying to do in the last 2.5 years, but we will highlight a few issues here tonight. I'll hand over to Dick.
Thank you and good evening. As Richard says, we've been working for the best part of 2.5 years, supported by North Somerset Council in a number of ways, both through the staff and in particular the ability for us to lodge what we know of as pre-apps. There have been 5 of these, not one of which has yet come to fruition. 2 failed for reasons that are included in the note, which I don't need to go through. We have persuaded Tickenham Parish Council to look positively at a housing needs survey. It was almost like going into the lion's den, we felt. But we were able to persuade them, and again, with your help and the help of a benefactor, Charles Elton, we think that the funding can be found for that. So we're hoping we can spark other people into action on this as well. The same gentleman I mentioned, Charles Elton, is a well-known benefactor, or his family is in the Cleveland area, and he has generously offered some land that he owns, including this field in Tickenham. He's also offered another field, which is on the boundary, or in the adjoining the settlement area of Cleveland, and we've been struggling to raise a pre-app for that, but the funding that we were previously not required to give has now been changed, and we're now being asked to pay for it. However, in the light of what you're going to have to be doing in terms of looking for new land and new opportunities to meet these new housing demands, we believe that this field, and I have got a schedule here which I'll leave if anyone's particularly interested. It is described in the note, so in a sense I don't need to say any more, but we believe it provides a huge opportunity for a considerable increase in the number of affordable homes. We're also talking with you, we hope, as a partner in Cleveland on the developments in Castlewood. We also are waiting for a response on a heads of terms agreement for another site. And we're also trying to motivate a number of groups in Cleveland, business groups, church groups, charities and others, to give their support to us in public membership so that we can provide a groundswell of opinion to justify and back the proposals that we're coming forward with. So in particular, what we would ask you tonight is to do what you can under this new scenario to bring forward and push for the work on Mill Cross, to expedite the agreement for this heads of terms, to work proactively with us in evolving a plan for Castlewood, and support an application for significant housing on the Charles Elton Field in Clevedon. We understand that you've had and have staffing shortages which haven't helped, but we are almost at the point where we give up if we can't actually move forward. So thank you for your time. Richard, I don't know if you've got anything else you need to say.
Yeah, I just want to emphasise the seriousness of the situation. With a request from us and some badgering, North Somerset Council did carry out a housing needs survey in Clevedon and found that there was a need for 280 houses for rental, basically. 280, that's a lot. There have been no social housing built in Clevedon for well over 40 years. You know, I mean, when I was a district councillor a couple of years ago, I had a fair bit of casework with people living in inadequate and crowded accommodation. Now, there's a picture of me taken in 1959, standing there outside the back door of the council house that I was born into, basically. I'm the reason my family got that very good house. When I was a district councillor, I remember one piece of casework in particular. Went to a family, a young woman with 3 or 4 kids, well, I think it's 4, and one of them was a little boy roughly that age, and he was standing there, and I thought, wow, you know, what kind of life expectation, what kind of housing expectation have you got compared to me 65 years ago? You know, we have gone backwards in our society in that we do not see it as a thing to do to provide decent housing for people. And that's all we're asking. We're asking within Clevedon to be able to get some houses built. With your help, hopefully, with the new government, the new approach, we will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Dick. Very helpful. And I think I can probably safely say you are definitely preaching to the converted in everything that you've talked about this evening. So really appreciate you coming along. And again, I'll ask the relevant exec members to follow up and come back to you on some of those issues. Thank you very much. Okay, and then our fourth and final public speaker is Paul Borthwick. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also speaking about housing. At the I'm a member of the Disabled Access Group. At the Access Group meetings last year, we were told that North Somerset's local plan would have 5% accessible housing going forward, which is a figure of 780, roughly, of your 15,000-ish houses. We have since found out at a meeting late last year that it's 5% of affordable housing, which is 280 maximum accessible housing. We have tried to ascertain how many accessible houses are in North Somerset now. North Somerset Council do not seem to know how many accessible houses are in the housing stock. Alliance Home also don't know how many accessible houses they manage, which is a little bit disconcerting. Looking through the paperwork, the government recommendation is for 11% accessible housing in the local plan, with mitigating circumstances lowering it down, presumably economics. We had a very heated debate with one of your officers because we felt that we were being shortchanged. North Somerset should be looking after its disabled population better. We were told that you had consultants who did work around this issue. We were interested to find out who they consulted with because we can't find any disability organisations in North Somerset that they consulted with. So you're going to build 280 if we're lucky, accessible houses. The current government statistics are 4% of the population are wheelchair users. Yeah, that's possibly 10,000 people living in North Somerset, plus other disabled people with other impairments that would benefit from living in an accessible accommodation, visually impaired people, autistic people. There's quite a few people that would benefit from accessible accommodation. Your get out is that all the new buildings going forward presumably will be adaptable. As I've mentioned to several councillors, on your local plan it suggests that to convert an adaptable house into an accessible house will cost about £9,000. If you think about it, you've got to replace the kitchen, you've got to put a lift in, you've got to take the bathroom out and make it a wet room, you've got to put an accessible toilet in, you've got to put ramps front and back, you've got to put lighting and fixtures and fitting, plug sockets have got to be moved. You're looking at least £40,000 per house. If it's social housing, that's going to be a grant from your housing fund, so that's going to be expensive for you. If it's private and someone's mortgaging, they've got to find that money above and beyond their mortgage. That was quick. Sorry, I was very quick.
Thanks very much, Paul. Very good points. And if you're here for the debate on the local plan later, I hope you'll hear some positive movement, because we've absolutely been listening on this issue. Okay, thank you very much to all four of our public speakers, and we'll carry on with the agenda now. So item 2 is apologies for absence, and I believe we have 2 apologies this evening, which is from Councillor Catherine Gibbons and Councillor James Clayton, and I can see that everybody else is here, so therefore... Oh yes, and no Roger. Oh yeah, good point. Have we had apologies from Roger? He's on holiday, so I thought he was still on holiday though, so he's definitely not coming because he's on holiday. He's got a better offer. Okay, thank you very much. So item 3 is disclosures of disclosable pecuniary interest. Any interest to declare, colleagues? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting from the 24th of April. So I'll move those as an accurate record. Thank you, Mark. Seconded. No dissenters. Okay, great. Item 5 is non-executive councillors' addresses. We've got none this evening. Item 6 is matters that have been referred that aren't on the agenda. There are none. Item 7, West of England sub-region, matters, none. Item 8 is the forward plan dated the 3rd of July, which is for noting. So are colleagues content to note? Yes, thank you. Okay, so then the first substantive item is item 9, which is the street lighting contract commissioning plan. So over to you, Hannah, to introduce that item, please.
That's great. Given how quickly we got from 1 to 9, I'm thinking I probably don't have long for this, do I? It's a straightforward paper, this one. I'm asking the executive to approve the commissioning plan for street lighting procurement. We've already done quite a lot of work around replacement of particularly LED for the street lights, which has saved a great deal of money and of course is really important for the environment, but there is a huge amount of work that still needs to be done to upgrade our current street lighting stock. The paper sets out the policy priorities so that we continue to ensure that street lighting supports our places to thrive. I did just want to particularly highlight on page 33 that this has been through a scrutiny process, which was very helpful. We had an interesting discussion and highlighted the need for us to also enable town and parish councils to be able to access the contract when it's procured. I hadn't realised actually until that process that a number of our parishes also have assets, streetlight assets, which it can be obviously costly and difficult for them to contract individually. So we've taken that from scrutiny and it was noted and will be included in the procurement process, so that for those parishes and towns who do have that asset, we'll be making contact at the appropriate time and giving them the opportunity to do it. I really didn't plan to say anything more about this because I think it's a fairly straightforward procurement plan, essentially. So if anyone's got any questions, that's fine.
Thanks very much, Hannah. So can I have a seconder for that item? Thank you, Mark. So any questions or comments from any non-executive members in the room or online? I can't see any, so Jenna, please.
Thank you very much for this paper, and I really appreciate the involvement of parish councils in this. From my experience as a parish councillor, it has been incredibly difficult to get one street light fixed by this particular, the current contractor, just because of the volume of work and prioritization. So just to comment on social value, I do note there's a little bit on this because it is a big contract, and we do have a detailed social value policy for North Somerset, which I understand is being revised and updated at the moment. And I just wanted to say, you know, this is a really good opportunity, like with all procurement, to really come up with a very specific set of TOMs, themes, outcomes, and measures to really contribute to you know, more than just the contract value, and make it relevant, because sometimes it can be, I think perhaps, you know, all of us would benefit from more training in this to be able to specify the outcomes more. But it could be that there could be some environmental benefit, that someone does some gardening in Abbotsleigh, but you know, to fulfill this contract. But at the same time, it could be something much more about, I don't know, low emissions equipment, or something specific to the specific sites that the streetlights or whatever are being are relevant to. So, you know, you've got somewhere like Norway, where in Oslo, they have a plan of it by 2025, all municipal construction sites will be zero emissions. So I hope we use these social value parameters to move us towards much more relevant outcomes. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Hannah, do you want to?
Just very briefly, I appreciate the paper's relatively brief because of the stage we're at with the commissioning plan and the process, but I'm happy to take that feedback, and obviously we'll be keeping an oversight of what happens next with this piece of work. I have been really pleased with some of the highways contracts about the social value elements that we've procured through, particularly what springs to mind is the Wainwright's contract that we entered into earlier this year, and all sorts of work they're doing with both skills development, and I know a lot to come in terms of the opportunities for younger people and so on in our area. So lots of opportunity, I think, and definitely something that we can make more prominent as we go forward.
Great, thank you very much. So we've had a proposer and seconder. Can colleagues indicate their support for this paper, please? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 10, which is the 3 weekly residual, this is catchy, isn't it? 3 weekly residual waste collections consultation outcome report and recommendations. So that's over to you, Annemieke.
It's working, I guess. Thank you. So I think, like Hannah, I can probably be reasonably brief about this one because we've been talking about this for a very long time. Members are all aware of the proposals and the consultation that we undertook, and the fact that more than 9,000 responses were received, which equates to about 10% of all the households in North Somerset, which is, you know, a huge achievement. The consultation was deliberately framed in such a way that we were able to learn from residents and about residents' current habits in managing their waste and their feelings about recycling, and also how the proposed changes would affect them and their families. So the report in front of us is very detailed. It outlines people's responses to the questions, and officers have taken great care to take these into account and to build their proposals and future interventions around any concerns that were raised. The proposal before us then is to change from 2 weekly black bin collections to 3 weekly black bin collections, and at the same time to increase our recycling options to include things like soft plastics. Also, because 27% roughly of the content of current black bins is actually food waste, in very many times not even used at all, so unopened. So by doing this, we're going to encourage more food waste recycling, and that's something that we will actively work towards and advertise with residents. And in addition, we will help residents reduce the waste in their black bin by increasing our staff numbers to help them overcome whatever barriers they have identified for us, you know, when we do go to 3 weekly collections. At the same time, we recognise, of course, that some residents or larger households have medical or other needs and therefore find these changes very difficult. And so we're going to set up a very smooth process for identifying those people with particular needs and to support them in any transition in any way that they need. These combined measures will save us more than £1 million per annum, and this is done through reducing our residual waste, by reducing the number of vehicles needed on the road, which obviously then contributes to a reduction in our carbon footprint, and by increasing our income from recycling materials. That's it in short. I would say that I would like to hugely thank all officers who've been involved in this process and carried out this very extensive consultation. It is the biggest response that the Council has ever had to any consultation. It's been an enormous amount of work to interpret all the details and to draw up this report, and so huge thanks go to them. I'm aware that discussions about 3 weekly black bin collections have been held for a long time and started long before I became a councillor. So I think that I hope at least that we all agree that this is a very positive step forward now, and to reduce our costs while at the same time increasing our recycling rates. And I recommend this to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemieke. Is there a seconder for the recommendations? Thank you, Mike. Councillor Solomon. Okay, any questions or comments from any non-executive members? Yep, so I've got Tom first, Councillor Dorr.
Thank you. I just want to share the appreciation from myself, my residents and parish councils about how direct, user-friendly and just well presented the consultation was. And I hope this is, the design we can use for further consultations, because I hope we get what we want out of the consultation as well, because it was very, very well done. So a huge, thank you to Annemieke and her team, because I presume this is why I had such a high turnout, but it was a really, really good consultation.
Thank you, Tom. And I've got Councillor Smith, Luke.
Thank you, Chair. It's two comments, really. The first is that a lot of the data indicated households felt they would struggle, and it was a fairly big sample. So I would just ask the executive to really make sure that existing and new routes for waste collection are really looked at, particularly with referencing our fleet capacity, because the last thing we want is to change the systems and for any kinks to be found and it to be full on. And the second comment I would say is that we make any process for people trying to upgrade their bin, particularly for families, as user-friendly as possible, and that a suitable transition period is adapted.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before I let Annemieke come back in? Nope. Okay, over to you then, Annemieke, please.
Yes, just very briefly. Thank you to Thomas for those very positive comments. And as I said, I had already thanked all the staff because I think it's been a phenomenal job. So I'm really grateful to hear that it's gone down very well in other parts of the county as well. And absolutely to agree with the comments just made. I think it's really important that we make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible, and that we help all the residents as much as possible in this transition to make sure that it works for everybody. I think that's going to be really important, and I know that the staff are completely committed to making sure also that the communication about the whole transition is really, really high class, so that everybody is fully aware long before the actual change takes place. So I think we'll take all that into account. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've got no other comments. So if executive colleagues are happy to indicate their support for the proposals, please. Thank you very much. Okay, and we'll move on to item 11, which hopefully that's correct, is it? Yes. Item 11, which is the Q4 performance management update. So this is looking back to the final quarter of the last financial year. So if a week is a long time in politics, then 3 months ago definitely feels like a long time. This is obviously an information item, so I would encourage colleagues to have a look and drill into the detail. But it's really pleasing to note that 79% of our annual directorate statement commitments were completed or trending towards completion, which I think is really positive and highlights the positive work that everyone has been doing across the council, despite the enormous challenges that we know we've all got. Okay, any questions or comments on anything related to that report? Otherwise, we will take it as noted and move on. Yep, thank you very much. Okay, so item 12 is the public decarbonisation scheme at Hutton Moor. So I should kick off before introducing this report to thank Annemieke and Annemieke Waite and Mike Solomon as well for both being involved in this project, which is similar actually to the street lighting project. So this is a commissioning plan to select the contractor for the works that we're going to be carrying out at Hutton Moor Leisure Centre. The council was successful in securing £2.3 million of funding from the government's decarbonisation scheme, public sector decarbonisation scheme, and we're delighted that that's going to enable us to replace the gas-powered boilers at Hutton Moor with air source heat pumps and carry out some other insulation work. Together, this will obviously cut the operating costs in the long term of Hutton Moor, but also reduce carbon emissions by 340 tonnes per year. So a definite win-win. And it's worth noting that the report also mentions other works that we are doing at the Leisure Centre this year as well, including replacing the air handling units for the swimming pool, some roof replacement work, and a new passenger lift. So lots of good news on investment there. So I'm happy to propose the recommendations in the report and ask for a seconder. Thank you, Annemieke. Any questions or comments on this report? Yep, Mike. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. I'd just like to stress how important Hutton Moor is to us. It's really quite a flagship leisure centre. It's very, very well used and one of the most successful leisure centres in the UK. So this is great news for us. So well done, everybody.
Great stuff. Okay, I can't see any other questions or comments. So if colleagues again could indicate their support for the recommendations, please. Thank you. Okay, and we'll move on to item 13, which is the Local Plan Regulation 19 report. So that's over to you, Mark. Councillor Canford.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, and we seem to be here again. This is a long process, isn't it? I'd just like to give advance notice of a slight change on point 1, where we would like to add the words to the end of point 1, subject to any revised guidance received from the government, so we can be aware that we are fully aware of things changing. So I'm going to steal this from Michael. This has been a bit like snakes and ladders, hasn't it? This local plan process. We seem to make good strides forward and then slip on a snake all the way down again, and we have to start a whole part of the process again. But we clearly are in a position now where, one, we need to move forward, but be mindful that the new NPPF could well affect our housing numbers, and we will have to adapt and look at this all over again. I would like to say that we have had great representation from residents, from our communities, also, it would be fair to say, from the developers and the businesses, and I want to thank them all for that, because this is a process that needs everybody to be involved. And I would confidently say that we have made a lot of alterations due to that feedback and the observations that have been passed to us over the whole process. The current housing needs that we are basing our work on, and the evidence, is through the housing needs assessment, and not simply an arbitrary housing number that is going to be or has been imposed on us in the past, which I feel does tend to ignore our communities, and hopefully we will be able to proceed with the numbers that we currently are working to. There are a few principal changes in this Reg 19, where you can see them in 1.4, but a couple of the highlights are we will be proposing 60 hectares of employment land rather than the 50, so a 20% uplift. The deletion of the employment site at Junction 20 Clevedon, a reference to a new secondary school at Hutton, extension to the Greenbelt inset to cover operational buildings at the airport and their current permitted rights. But we will strengthen the existing Greenbelt around the airport which would include improvements to the landscape, the biodiversity, the footpaths and the cycleways. I think it's important to remember this does simply reflect their current permissions. We do understand the concerns that this raises, but we clearly still have opportunities to put our comments in on this through the consultation, and will continue to listen. In terms of wheelchair accessibility, we will now be required that all market housing, as well as affordable housing, will have to be 5%. This has been identified as the need, and or, if identified, it could be higher. I do accept we do not have full data around this because we're not aware of what residents do in their own private housing, so we can't be 100% sure of that data. The policies around public art and adoption as requested by full council, the production of public art strategy to be approved by council in conjunction with local communities to ensure delivery of high quality public art. So the wording to this is still to be completely decided in the reiteration going on with the minor amendments that will be made after this has gone through public consultation. And something that's been brought up in council, I had many meetings, is the policies relating to open space adoption and its management, so we can try and avoid the unpleasant surprises that some residents get in their new estates around management charges. Of course, we are doing this because we need to get to the next stage, but we will still require further input and discussion from members of this council, the public, through the consultation. So I would lastly like to thank the planning team, because as a huge amount of work has gone into this undoubtedly, and I thank them for their continued commitment because we're clearly not quite there yet. So I look support for the recommendations in the report with that slight amendment, Leader.
Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder for the proposal? Thank you, Hannah. Okay, any questions or comments? So I've got Councillor Bridger, Steve online, and then I'll come to you, Tom, in the room. Okay, over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Hope everyone can hear me okay in the chamber. Yeah, a couple of questions. Firstly, thanks, Mark, for bringing this and to officers. I've got a couple of questions. Apologies in advance that I've been away and missed the briefing last week and the PET panel yesterday, so I'm going to jump on this opportunity just to ask a couple of questions. The first one may have been captured, actually, Mark, by your by the amended wording to recommendation 1 that you referenced. But obviously, the new government have. Well, all we know so far, I think, is that we're going to have another MPPF consultation at the end, around the end of this month, and I think the paper that you presented suggests it's a bit bizarre, really. It sort of suggests that it will actually be up to the appointed inspector to decide which version of the MPPF our local plan will be assessed against. Given that. I think that the tentative dates we're working towards in terms of an examination are, potentially next spring. It may be, I know these consultations can take a long time, maybe 6 months from when they go out to when civil servants kind of compile all the submitted comments and it comes back as revised guidance. But that might be before spring 2025. So do we have a clue what version of the MPPF our local plan would be assessed against? That was the first question, a bit long-winded. The second one, which will be briefer, is to do with Greenbelt and the Greenbelt review, which is obviously another slight change of tack with the new government. My recollection is, as part of the evidence base for this, our new local plan, we did carry out a Greenbelt review, sort of 3 parts to it, I think, through 22, 23. The new government obviously has come up with this, coined this phrase, grey belt, to describe sort of poor quality, disused land and, ugly, in inverted commas, bits of the green belt. I kind of support that approach myself, but it isn't really clearly defined. I don't think our Greenbelt review as part of this process surfaced any land at all, actually, that might be termed grey belt, although that, is still to be defined what that actually means. But are you, Mark, as the executive, assured that we don't need to revisit that that Greenbelt review, that piece of work, or seek a legal opinion if we haven't done so already, because we know that developers will look at that, more closely now than they might have done previously. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I think I'll come. Yeah, we'll deal with that one first, and then I'll come to you, Tom.
It's a fairly short answer, and thanks, Steve. The two are linked. You're quite right. In terms of green or grey belt review, we really can't do anything as yet until we've seen the NPPF and what's being proposed. So yes, maybe, no, maybe not. So we'll have to wait until we got those details. But what I can assure you is we will engage through scrutiny and members to make sure we're all aware, because it does have quite an impact. If nothing is proposed, we'll continue with the plan as we do.
Yeah, the classic, we don't know what we don't know. Okay, over to you, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, so my last understanding of the decision to remove the airport of the Greenbelt, the airport from the Greenbelt, was that this wouldn't be put forward in this next plan. I know there's been a review, but looking at the review of the boundaries, the majority of the extension is actually already going to fields where it was in their permissions for the 10 and 12 that these were areas that they would have to be reinforcing, the nature, the biodiversity. So they are already, doing what you said we're going to do to the outer bits. But I just want to seek clarification on kind of the justification of this decision, because I was given the report that showed the pros and cons, and I was told that they weigh each other out. And from my residents and parish's point of view, this is not the case to us. And it's also, again, why I had a meeting about trying to be more engaged in these conversations around the airport as the person that, tries to represent the residents of Rinkton and the surrounding villages. And again, I've just come forward in that I haven't been consulted on any of these decision makings or the just having a consultation. I've had to ask for this report a week before this is coming to the exec, and I'm slightly concerned about that. But I sit on the ACC meeting and I sit on the PCAA meeting. These are all panels that look outwards towards local stakeholders, local residents and parish councils. And it's just not reflecting what we are as a council, what my knowledge and what I can and can't do on these panels, because I don't have the knowledge to do it because I'm not being consulted, then affects my ability to be, to do my job as a councillor and properly represent these people. So I think out of this, I just kind of want to know the justification on why we are making a different decision on this. And if we can try and, have more engagement with local parishes and myself on these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mark.
So thank you, Tom, for that. I understand your concern. I genuinely do. There was a great deal of discussion around the benefits of keeping in or taking out. But on reflection, we have at this stage, and as I reiterate, that the fact this isn't the final stage, and your residents and your parishes and yourself have further opportunity to comment in the next consultation, and you personally have the opportunity to consult with me directly. And I think it's important to say that we have weighed this up. We do believe that there is a benefit by doing this, partly because it, one, clears up the issues around the permitted development rights they already currently have, but also it gives us the opportunity to strengthen the exterior of the airport and the opportunities around the Greenbelt improvements. I will also ask Michael if he wants to comment any further, if he thinks I've missed anything on that. But yes, I am concerned you haven't possibly had all the information at every opportunity, and I'll certainly look at that. But it doesn't change the fact that at this stage we are looking at proposing to take that out and strengthen the other parts to it. And please make sure those who have those concerns show those concerns through the consultation. Is there anything you want to add, Michael?
That's absolutely right, Councillor. The only thing I would add was that the previous version of the plan, the Reg 19 we consulted on in November last year, proposed extending the Greenbelt to take out the extent of the airport, which has got the benefit of the outline permission. So that hasn't changed. But all we have done is gone back and reinforced that with adding in wording about compensatory improvements, which is part of the NPPF approach. And that is about the additional areas, not the areas which are actually identified through the planning application, but other areas which are going to remain as greenbelt, and looking at what options there might be to actually improve them in terms of their environment or the way local communities are using them. And that could be part of a discussion with the airport and local communities going forward.
And I would also add that I think it's important to recognise that having a recommendation that you don't agree with is not the same as you haven't necessarily been listened to. And I know that there has been good member engagement. There were all member briefings. There was a briefing at the relevant scrutiny panel as well. So there have absolutely been opportunities for members to find out more and to challenge through the process. So Jenna.
Thank you. Just on the public art wording, I just wanted to clarify that because we have been working on some of the wording up to this afternoon, and is it that the current version of the local plan that we see in this in these papers will be submitted for, will be published for consultation, but then as it is with the current public art wording, and then our agreed public art wording goes in a bit later, or is it going to be consulted on or not? I'm just confused.
I'm understanding that we will go with what we have, and then we will make slight alterations to it. I think what we must be really careful of it, Jenna, is that council have passed a motion, and we can't change the essence of that motion. We don't have the right to do so. So I think it's really important that we make sure that that motion is reflected in the local plan and we don't change that. But of course, we have the opportunity to change some of that wording, because that would be minor amendment, because I don't think we're in total disagreement. Maybe is part of it, and we can have that discussion. But in the general, public art is something I think we all approve of, and we passed it in the motion quite clearly. But we can't change the nature of that motion. I don't know if you want to...
So I was just going to say, so just for clarity, the version that is in these documents has already been strengthened following the council motion, and indeed feedback that had already been submitted by members around public art. So that's the version that's going to go out to public consultation. But clearly it's a consultation, so there is still an opportunity, and the recommendations allow for further amendments. So if there are minor tweaks that members or the consultation wants to make to that report, then we can do that as part of the final plan making process. But just to underline, it has already been strengthened compared to where we were in the previous consultation version. So just to underline that. Is that okay? Yep. Sorry, Tom, did you want to come back in?
Sorry, yeah. I thank you to Michael, Mark and Micah for the comments back. I mean, I have tried to be engaged as much as possible, but I've been quite busy for the last couple of weeks. Same as a lot of other people. I just wanted to be added and minuted that while I said that I haven't been fully informed, I also feel the council as a whole hasn't been fully informed by not the decision. Trying to think of words. What the airport is expecting to do, because we haven't had the master plan or a full surface access strategy from them. And I'm just cautious of us making decisions around the airport when we don't know their intentions. Which is something that was meant to be given to us in 2019, and we are still waiting for it. So I don't need to comment back, I just wanted that to be minuted.
Thanks, Tom. So we've all heard the comments, and I don't think anyone disagrees that in an ideal world we'd be doing our local plan and airport master planning and many other things in parallel and in alignment with each other. But obviously we've got a legal obligation to try and deliver a local plan, which is what we've been trying to do. And I have to say, I would just echo the comments that Mark made earlier in terms of officers and our community actually, who have been incredibly patient and engaged with us over multiple iterations of this plan. We are going to be on our third different NPPF in a year, by the sounds of it, which is not an environment for stable plan making and policy making. And we've really tried to go the extra mile in terms of that consultation and engagement piece, breaking everything down over a long period of time. And this latest version shows again that the council is genuinely listening and changing the plan in response to the feedback that we get. But I think it is important to recognise that this is an almost impossible task for every local authority around the country, because we really are trying to make something fit into an environment where it just doesn't fit and where we don't have complete control and freedom in terms of our plan making policy. Mark.
And I just want to add, for clarity, that the responses we've had for previous versions will make part of the evidence, but I do ask that residents, businesses, again, go to the consultation and fill in again. I do understand that is frustrating. I do understand it can be a bit annoying, but as it builds the evidence for the case, for them or for the council in support or against. It is important you put it in on this Reg 19 version and not just assume that your previous comments have been taken into account, because it is a different version.
And we'll be back to do it all again in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. That's been a really helpful discussion and debate and raised some of those issues there. So we've had a proposer and seconder. So if exec members could indicate their support for the recommendations or otherwise. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 14, which is the adoption of the updated bus service improvement plan document. And that's over to you, Hannah, please.
Thanks, Mike. We had a paper to the April executive explaining that we were being required by the Department for Transport to put together an update to our bus service improvement plan. So we already covered that at that April meeting. And I think we also explained in that paper the process that we were undertaking to be able to develop that refresh, as it was being called at the time. So now I'm asking the executive to approve the update to the plan, and it's in the public pack. For anyone to have a look at should they wish to, for submission to the Department of Transport. Just a quick reminder, so we were notified earlier this year that we had to do this update and to submit it to the Department for Transport by the 12th of June. We had to negotiate an extension to the date because we weren't able to meet and make decisions as an executive during the general election, pre-election period. So we are still waiting to do that and looking forward hopefully to being able to approve this today. The update is not a bid for funding, but all authorities have been asked to submit these plans to help the Department for Transport and the Treasury to understand the level of funding that is needed to bring the bus network up to the standard that was described in the bus strategy, so that they can make representations to the Treasury, as no doubt there'll be spending review in the autumn and we'll all be anxiously awaiting an understanding of what those future budgets will look like. So this doesn't commit us to particular funding bid at this stage. I was very keen, as I know my colleagues were, to ensure that we don't just undertake this update as a group of officers in a darkened room, but that we undertake that work as far as possible with wider involvement of ward members, towns and parishes. And we've had a number of engagement sessions which are referenced in the covering paper, as well as having undertaken surveys with bus champions and engaged with local businesses as well. So there has been an extensive process, I think, within the time constraints to try to get as many views as possible about what we need to do going forward to make the priority improvements that people want to see. The refreshed plan itself, I think, is much more user-friendly than the last version, which equally had to be developed in haste. So hopefully it's easier for people to read and understand what we think are the priorities and what's been said to us about what people's local priorities are. I think there's some good news in there for us all. Nationally, bus usage has recovered to 76% of what it was pre-pandemic. It's still not back to fully operating as it did before the COVID, which is what we need it to do really for it to become a sustainable service. But in North Somerset, it's returned to 85% of pre-pandemic usage. So we're actually doing really well compared to the national position. And for us in North Somerset, compared to the West of England more widely, the West of England has had a rate of increase of passenger journeys at 20% year on year. North Somerset seeing an increase of 26% year on year. So we are seeing more and more people using the buses, and that means our service is stabilising much more quickly than in other local authority areas. We know that there's still a lot to do, and particularly around passenger satisfaction levels, which haven't recovered in quite the same way and are slightly lower than national levels at the moment. So some key points that we're emphasising in this next update to the plan is that what we really want to see, particularly is an extension of the national £2 fare. That's been a huge importance to people, particularly at times of cost of living pressures. It's made a big difference, I think, to people's propensity to get on the bus. And we also want to see more low, simple fare structures. We've had some great success with our fare offers, particularly our local care leavers package. And we've had a lot of users of the birthday bus scheme. We've seen a lot of people switch from journeys that they would have taken by car and that they've taken the bus and continued to do so, whether permanently or on an ad hoc basis. So it's helping us to see the modal shift. And we want to see a national approach to reduced fares for young people. We'd also, I think, key features of this plan are wanting to see a move towards a much more integrated transport network. It's something that people talk to me about all the time, making sure that rural services link with key transport corridors, whether they're rail corridors or bus corridors, and that we have separate round town services that people want to see in our core towns in North Somerset. Multimodal ticketing, so you can get on a bus and direct on to rail more easily, better real-time information so that we can really tackle that issue of people standing at a bus stop and finding that a bus is due to come and then suddenly the whole screen changes and you find that a bus is cancelled. It's the worst thing in the world. There is work going on within the current BSIP to address it, but it's something that we absolutely need to get right. And a focus particularly on the areas we've just talked about, the local plan. We know that we absolutely have to focus on improving the public transport network in those housing growth areas identified within the local plan. And again, lots of work already ongoing, but something that needs to continue into the future. And other things like facilities at the Western Interchange, improved pedestrian and cycle access to bus stops. There's lots and lots that we would really want to be able to do to improve people's access to bus services. I think a feature of this plan is that we're seeing less focus than our previous one on bus priority infrastructure projects. We were incredibly ambitious. There has been some really positive early results from the review that we've had about the schemes that we've done so far. But there's a lot in plan already, so we're not putting so much priority on those aspects in this version of the plan. And importantly, together with the West of England Combined Authority, we've expressed our desire to undertake the preliminary work, assuming that there are funds to do it, to explore alternative delivery approaches such as franchising, if those would help us to deliver better services across the region, and to look at the emerging legislation that we imagine will come from the government on that. We've certainly heard that the Labour government plans to enable communities to take back control of local bus services. And, we've had many times over the course of the last year in this chamber, through the bus forum, through comments to the executive more widely, questions about why doesn't the council put on this bus service or that service, why don't we change routes and so on. And a lot of that, most of that is not within our gift. We're not indeed allowed to have that control over bus services. So we will be exploring opportunities to do that as we go forward. And that's all I have to say at this point. I'm very happy to take questions, but otherwise I would ask the executive to approve the plan.
Thank you, Hannah. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Anamika. I like the sound of everything that you were saying, Hannah, but I particularly like the idea that for the first time we can put take back control on the side of a bus and it'll be a good thing. So that's good news. Any questions?
I'm just looking forward to the 350 million that's going to come with it.
Yeah, we can look forward to it. Mind you, that will be more trouble. I don't think there are any questions. Oh, yes. Oh, hang on. Tom first.
No, I was just
he left and then he came back.
Sorry, I am still here. I was just going to put in a comment of just the appreciation again to Hannah of like how much this has been a whirlwind of just a scheme, and it's really, really good to see us now focusing on some more active travel around it and people getting to and from. And the mention of franchising has massively excited me. So thank you very, very much for this report, and I'm glad that we are learning from our previous decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mark.
And I just want to support Hannah and thank her again for the work and particularly the point around the £2 fare, and also for younger people and particularly our students in the district. But I can just, I've got a person who would never get out of his car, looking at the moment of getting out of his car and going into Bristol for a new job every day by the bus.
Yeah, it's not you though, Mark, is it? That's the problem. But anyway,
Mark goes to the rugby. It's all right.
You've done a great job. You haven't done it quite that well yet. Okay, thank you very much. And there's just two things I want to say. One of them is a complete waste of time because nobody's listening, but I'll say it anyway. And that is, members, please read the report and understand what the direction of travel is around bus service improvement work, because I think some of the problems and issues that we've had with our existing programme of bus service improvement work is that members did not take the time to read and understand what was going on. And so some of this has come as a surprise. So please take the time to read it. It is much more digestible and understandable and aspirational. So it's not, we're not in handcuffs here, that we're in control of this. And this is an opportunity for us to help shape that agenda and that conversation with government. And secondly, just to say, again, a big thank you to the teams involved in supporting this work, because it's an unbelievably complex area. They've been trying to deliver multifaceted, multi-million-pound revenue and capital schemes at the same time as looking ahead to what comes next, managing really difficult and complex relationships with the combined authority, with the Department for Transport, with our town and parish councils and with operators. And so really recognise that it's been a tough job, and I really appreciate all the hard work that everyone put in. Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. So our colleagues, exec members, happy to support the recommendations? Yep, thank you very much. Okay, I'll move on to item 15, which is the adoption of draft school place planning strategy. So normally Catherine Gibbons, our deputy leader and exec member for children and young people in schools, would be presenting this, but she's absent, so I will cover it off. This report obviously sets out how the council intends to make sure that we deliver sufficient mainstream and specialist school places over the coming years. It's actually, although it sounds like a really dry report, it's really interesting to read. There's more than 80 schools in North Somerset. Only 6 of them do we have any direct management responsibility for. Majority of them are academies and trusts, so operating semi-independently. And there's a complex network of relationships and partnerships that we have got to manage in order to make sure that those school places are available in the right place and with the right support. I know Claire and the team and Catherine have done lots of consultation and engagement work to support the development of this strategy, and Catherine has particularly asked me to thank all the schools, parents, teachers, families and children and young people that were involved in these conversations, and particularly those from the families with children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, because that's a really challenging area in terms of making sure that we have the right places in the, for the support in the long run. But I'm going to leave it there and just propose that we accept the recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mike. Any questions? I'm asking any questions, but I think only Steve Bridges is online. So, okay, in which case, are colleagues happy to support the recommendations, please? Thank you. Okay, and we'll move on to item 16, which is the climate adaptation strategy, and that's over to you, Annemieke, please.
Thank you. So our climate adaptation strategy sets out our climate projections for the North Somerset area. It looks at the level of flood risk and localised heat vulnerability. It assesses the level of risk for all of the above and their potential economic impact. The strategy outlines the various actions to which we are committed as a council in relation to a number of different areas. One is governance and monitoring, but it also looks at the impact on our infrastructure, transport and assets. It looks at the impact on our natural environment. It looks at the health of our residents and how this impacts the communities and the built environment, and it looks at the impact it might have on business and industry. So this strategy was presented at Full Council in April and supported by Full Council. As we were all present at that meeting, I won't repeat the more lengthy statements that I made at the time, but just wanted to point out that since then, following the peer review, which I know is coming up after this, we discussed our commitment to the 2030 target at CLT Exec. And although at that time, when we discussed it, we all recognised that reaching net zero by 2030 will be difficult to achieve. But it was also recognised that in having set 2030 as a target date, we're definitely not an outlier. A very large number of councils have similarly got a target date of 2030, and that achieving that target date to a large extent will depend on government policies and funding being made available. In light of recent elections and the new government in place, there is real hope that fresh legislation will now come forward which will support and finance this transition. And we are obviously, all of us, awaiting further details of the government policy in this respect. So in the meantime, as a council, we will push forward with the climate adaptation plan with whatever powers and capacity and funding we do have available. I know that at full council, everyone was very appreciative of the strategy that we put forward at the time. And so unless there are other questions, I will just recommend that this strategy is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemieke. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments on this report? Nope. Okay, in which case, can colleagues indicate their support, please, for the recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Annemieke. And we'll move on to item 17, which is the report and action plan on our recent Local Government Association peer review. So for those that don't know, the peer review process is an important opportunity for the council to effectively take a breath and get some independent challenge from officers and elected members from other councils who come in for a period of a few days, carry out some interviews and discussions with members and officers, and just give you a bit of a temperature check of how you're doing as a council. So I'd just like to put on record our thanks to the peer team that came from the different councils with the LGA and for the time that they gave to working with us. The report is obviously in the public domain with the executive agenda papers, and we have developed an action plan to address the 10 recommendations or areas of focus that were suggested by the peer review team. And the intention is that we'll report back regularly to members on the progress against the action plan to ensure that we're maximising the lasting benefits from the review. So I think the recommendation is to note and adopt the report and action plan. So can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Annemieke. Any questions from anyone on that item? Yes, Annemieke?
Just a quick comment, really, to say that one of the recommendations was that we would work on our relationships with strategic partners and run some workshops, and in fact that's already happening next week. We have our workshops with our strategic partners next week, and so I'm really pleased to say we're making progress on that already.
Thanks, Annemieke. And actually, anyone who looks at the action plan will realise that not only are we underway on a number of them, there's even one or two that we've completed already. So we've definitely tried to hit the ground running and take action. Okay, I've got no questions or comments. So again, colleagues, happy? Thank you very much. Okay, item 18 is the Finance Outturn report for 23-24. So again, this is the report that looks back on the previous financial year and the final outturn achieved. There are 6 recommendations in the report, which are principally about noting the outturn, approving a few further changes to the revenue and capital budgets as a consequence of the outturn report, and then a couple of other items, a proposed procurement route for the replacement of our waste fleet, a land disposal at Western Business Quarter, and some capital works required at Western Household Waste Recycling Centre. So we're just taking the opportunity to wrap up a few of those issues as part of the finance outturn. I mean, the report itself highlights exactly the same kinds of things that we've covered many times during our monthly finance updates to the executive. So we have continued to balance the budget, but this has been achieved despite significant demand pressures and cost pressures, particularly in children's services, waste management and transport. But we have been able to achieve the broadly balanced position at the year end. But it's important to remember that that's only been done as a result of introducing spending controls, some quite tough vacancy management, and the release of some of our reserves to support our costs. So these are all things that we can't keep doing over and over again, and we certainly can't repeat in this current year. So despite the fact that we are continuing to encounter demand and cost pressures in this financial year as well. So the story, I'm afraid, of financial pressure continues, and we all hope that a new government with the commitment to longer term settlements and a commitment to more devolution of powers and responsibilities will help us to be better equipped to rise to those challenges. So I'm going to propose that we note the report and approve the recommendations. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mark. Is there anything you particularly wanted to add, Amy? No? Okay, great. Any questions or comments? I don't think I can see any. Nope. Okay, so are we happy to approve the recommendations, please? Thank you very much. Okay, then we've got item 19, which is the report on executive appointments to outside bodies. So Nick will correct me if this is wrong, but I think all of the appointments are as printed and the same as last year, with the exception that we will have a new nomination for the Bristol Airport Environmental Improvement Fund, which is to replace last year's appointment, which was former councillor Steve Hogg. And we are expecting that nomination to come from the Green Group leader, Councillor Petty. So we'll take that as read when she submits that nomination. Is that all? Yep, great, thank you. And everyone happy with that? Yep, okay, great, thank you very much. And then item 20 is oral reports from executive members. So has anyone anything that they want to update on this evening? Yep, Hannah?
Yeah, just two small things. I have been asked a number of times recently about what's happening with the BSIP review, the pause and review that we've obviously talked about a lot earlier in the year. So just as a really quick update, there's been a huge amount of work going on to look at all of the areas that we said that we would when we set the pause and review in place back in April. Just some of those were a review of the data and benefits of the priority schemes that have been put in place so far, the lessons learned from the Brockley-Coombs scheme implementation, and a review of the implications of what was then the new government bus priority guidance that was released in March, which had a huge amount of stuff in it, but for sort of public consciousness was considering issues as should bus lanes be permanent full-time, or should they be in use for only peak times and things like that, motorcycles in bus lanes, what about cyclists in bus lanes. So the outcomes of those pieces of work are all going to the scrutiny panel of Transport, Climate and Communities next Thursday, 25th, which is a public meeting at 2 o'clock. If anyone's interested in being part of that, the papers are online. Please feel free to have a look. We want to get this right going forward. So once we have that feedback from scrutiny, then obviously both I and you and Catherine and the wider exec will be looking at how we take things forward. We've currently got a number of decisions listed for no earlier than August in the forward plan, but we've also got some additional work going on looking at the team and anything else that we need to put in place with, particularly with our partners in WECA. So I'm anticipating that the large bulk of that work will have been completed by the end of July, early August, and we'll start to be in a position where we can talk about what next. So I just wanted to let people know that we haven't forgotten what we were doing with all of the hiatus around the election. And then just lastly, the other thing I wanted to mention was I know that there had been some consternation about the suspension of the X10 service in Clevedon, Portishead, up to Cribbs Causeway, Filton and Southmead Hospital. That's one that we were really pleased came back as a commercial service and was getting some really good usage following the community campaign to bring it back. We had some really kind of great passenger usage of that service. Transpora have obviously had some difficulties, and there have been some discussions about takeover by another company. I'm just really pleased that at the moment the Big Lemon are continuing to run that service, and although we don't have a definitive position about the future, I just want to reassure people that officers are working really hard behind the scenes so that we don't lose that going forward. And we can't at this stage confirm arrangements, but I'm really hopeful that very soon we'll be able to provide some further information. So please watch this space.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah. And there was just one thing that I wanted to just put in the record, and that is our congratulations and thanks to all the staff who were nominated in the recent staff awards. The staff awards are a really important opportunity to recognise all the hard work that goes on right across the council, and I think the real power and value in them is that you're nominating each other. And when we were reviewing the nominations, it really spoke to the hard work and dedication of so many of our teams right across the council, in every directorate and in every service. There was the same story, people dedicated and trying their best in often very difficult circumstances. So I'm sure all of us would pass on our congratulations and thanks to those that were nominated, those that won awards, but also everybody else who sits behind those people and helps us keep moving forward every day. Okay, and then the very last item is item 21, which is urgent business, of which there is none. So the urgent business is to close the meeting. Thank you very much.